Thanks for starting with this prayer. This will be different than how I usually try to do classes. I try to ask really simple questions to just keep you involved, but for the sake of the video, I'll just be reading stuff myself. So anyway, I'll try to not make it that long, and then we'll have some discussion. So I want to read a section from the D&C. It's section 140. 145 C and D. It says, "The work of preparation and the perfection of my saints go forward slowly, and Zionic conditions are no further away nor any closer than the spiritual condition of my people justifies. But my word shall not fail, neither will my promises, for the foundation of the Lord standeth sure." Sorry, I forgot to explain. There's paper there. I would like for you to, if I ask a question, try to write down an answer if you have an answer. If you don't have an answer, don't feel pressured to write anything down. But just if something comes to mind, write down an answer, and in the discussion portion, we'll talk about it. The first question I would have is, do you believe this scripture? Not necessarily, have you heard it before? That doesn't really matter. Solely just, do you believe what it says here, that Zionic conditions are no further away nor any closer than the spiritual condition of my people justifies. And I like to lay out a story from the Old Testament that I think is really, really cool. I won't say for sure that's why it happened in the first place, but I think looking back at the Old Testament, there are a lot of lessons we can learn, and this is one of them. So we'll mostly be in Genesis, if you want to turn there. 27 is where we will start, and this is the story of Jacob stealing Esau's blessing. So Isaac has two sons, Esau and Jacob. Esau being the older one, he's hairy, has red hair, he's a hunter. Jacob being the younger one, it says he has smooth skin, like a dolphin. That's not in there. And he's younger, obviously, not a hunter. So there's this slight competition between the two. And Isaac is getting older. He wants to bless his oldest son. And so he calls for Esau and he says, "Hey, go kill me. Go bring me some venison. Go, kill me a deer or whatever, and bring me the venison. And then when you bring it to me, I'll bless you." Well, Isaac's wife, Rebecca, hears this, and she likes Jacob more than Esau because he's a mama's boy or something, I don't know. And she says, "Hey, you should go kill one of the sheep that's in our flock. Go bring it back. I'll prepare it like he likes his venison. We'll trick him. We'll put sheep skin on your hands and the parts where we think he'll touch to make sure that you're Esau. We're going to trick him to make him think you're Esau, and you're going to get that blessing." Okay, so he says, "I don't know about that, Mom, but okay." And she's like, "I will take the blame for this. You're going to do it." And so he does. And that is all in chapters 27. The description of 27, I really think is funny. It says, "Jacob by stratagem obtains his brother's blessing." It just sounds like a movie description, but like a comic book description, actually. But anyway, so that's what it is. Esau comes back after Jacob has gotten the blessing. And he says, "All right, Dad, I'm here. I brought the venison, ready for my blessing." And the dad is like, "What do you mean? I just blessed you. Who are you?" He said, "I'm your firstborn." And he's like, "Uh-oh, I definitely blessed Jacob instead of you." And Esau is pretty mad about that. And so he's like, "Well, just give me a blessing now because I am the oldest son." And Jacob kind of beats around the bush, and Esau kind of whines, and he finally gets Isaac to cave. And I want to read, first we'll read Jacob's blessing, which is the supposed firstborn's blessing, and then we'll read Esau's blessing. So Jacob's starts in verses 27. It's verses 27 through 29. And I'll read that. It says, "He came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his raiment and blessed him and said, 'See, the smell of my son is a smell of the field which the Lord hath blessed him. Therefore, God, give thee of the dew of heaven, and the fatness of the earth, and plenty of corn and wine. Let people serve thee, and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Cursed be everyone that curseth thee. Blessed be he that blesses thee.'" So then this is where Esau comes in. He realizes he didn't get his blessing. Isaac realizes he blessed the wrong son. He starts to give Esau this blessing, and that's in verse 38 through 40. It says, "Esau said unto his father, Hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, Behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above. And by the sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. And Esau heard this blessing, and he said, Man, my brother's blessing was way better than that. That one was really bad. So he was pretty mad. Jacob hears that he's really mad enough that he's going to kill him. So he says, I'm going to run away. He goes to his dad, and his dad says, if you're going to go away and go find a wife, I want you to go to this specific spot. And that's in the verses at the beginning of chapter 28. So he does that. He goes to his mother's brother, Laban, who he meets in verse 28 and 29, and he meets the girl of his dreams, Rachel. And so this is really where it comes into the story that I really wanted to dive into. He meets Rachel. He says, Laban, I'll give you whatever you want. I want Rachel as my wife. And he says, well, how much do you think she's worth? And he goes, I will work for you for 7 years. And if you would give me her to be my wife. Laban agrees. He works 7 years. You know the story. Instead of Rachel, he gets Leah, Rachel's older sister. He's pretty mad about that. And he goes to Laban and goes, what the heck? I just worked for you for 7 years. I don't love Rachel. I don't love Leah. I love Rachel. What are we to do about this? And he goes, well, if you work for me another 7 years, I'll give you Rachel. And he goes, all right, I guess I'll do it. And a part of that when he is working for Rachel the first time, it's really interesting. In verse 20 of chapter 29, it says, Jacob served him 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days for the love he had to her. He loved her so much. 7 years felt like a few days, which is just, it's very romantic, but it's also like, he had very strong feelings towards Rachel, and yet still Laban was like, all right, take my oldest daughter, please get her out of the house. And so a big betrayal anyway. So Rachel is his big love. He is married to both of them now. Both of them have handmaidens, and as is the pattern, you get married and then you start to have children. They're starting to have children. And Leah is the first one to have children. She has 3 boys. It starts at the beginning. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, 4, and then Judah. Rachel's womb is barren. I will take a pause here, and in several instances, a pause in the story, and in several instances, 3 of which being Revelation 12, Ezekiel 16, and Isaiah 62, we find the church compared to a woman. And so what I really like to do, often, I guess, is look at stories of women, especially in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament too, and substitute the church in for whatever woman is in the story and just see if there are any lessons to be learned. And that's what I like to do with this story in particular. And it's one of my favorite stories to do that with, because there's a lot to be learned if the church is substituted for Rachel. So in that metaphor where the church is this woman who is to be wed, the husband of the church is always Jesus, right? And so just keep that in mind. Okay, so we have this Jesus character in Jacob, who is married to Leah and Rachel, his true love. Leah starts to have children. He has several boys from Leah's handmaid. Rachel gets really worked up about not having children, and she's being bullied by Leah, and I'm sure the place where they are, for not having children. And she comes to Jacob and says, "Why won't you give me a son?" And he goes, "What do you mean? I'm trying my best, you know." It's just an awkward situation because there's a lot of societal pressure on her. And I think still she feels probably weird about her sister being with her husband too. And anyway, that whole situation. Probably comparing herself pretty heavily to her sister. Weird, especially by today's standards, but weird. So that's where we are. So she gives Jacob her handmaid, and through her, Jacob has more sons, and it gets to where he has 10 sons, and God finally opens Rachel's womb. She has this son, Joseph. And this is the Joseph of Egypt, the Joseph with a coat of many colors. And this is setting the stage for why he was hated by all the other brothers, because none of their moms were loved by their dad. And so in my mind, none of the sons were probably loved nearly as much as Joseph was loved by Jacob, because this was his son in his mind through his true wife that he loved the most. Okay, but I want to read the verse where she gives birth to Joseph, and that happens in chapter 30, verses 23 and 24. It says, "And she conceived and bare a son, and said, God hath taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, and said, the Lord shall add to me another son." I think this is pretty interesting. She finally has this son. She names him Joseph. And then the first thing she says is she feels like God is going to give her another son. She feels like she's promised this other son. Well, how is she to know, you know? And we don't know really why. But years go by. Joseph is sold into Egypt, and a part of that is obviously that the dad and the mom both think that he's dead. But this son that she feels like she was promised comes in chapter 35. So if you turn there, and this is the gist of the story. Sorry, it's so much setup, but I think it's really beneficial to look at the struggle it was to get to this point. Here's this man who was driven from his home by really the choice of his mother. He finds this woman that he loves. He's betrayed. He works 14 years to marry this woman that he really loves. He can't have a son with this woman he really loves, but has 10 sons through other women. And it's just this whole struggle to get here. And she finally conceives, bears him a son, his 11th son, Joseph. And she says, I feel like I'm promised one more son. I feel like I'm promised a son. So let's read that account in chapter 35. And this is 10 and 11. God is talking to Jacob again. It says, God said unto him, thy name is Jacob. Thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name. And he called his name Israel. And God said unto him, I am God Almighty, be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins. Again, he's already had 11 sons at this point. God comes to him and says, I'm changing your name officially. He's already wrestled this angel that says, I'm going to call you Israel instead of Jacob. But God says, you are called Jacob. I am going to call you Israel. So it's an official name change. And then a part of that, he says, be fruitful and multiply. And I don't think he's necessarily talking to Jacob's family or Israel's family at this point. I think he's talking to Israel still. He says, have another son, have another child. And so it goes on, and they were journeying from Bethel, and they were a little way, and this is verse 16. They journeyed from Bethel, and there was but a little way to come to Ephrath, and Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. And it came to pass, she was in hard labor, that the midwife said unto her, fear not, thou shalt have this son. And it came to pass, as her soul was in departing, for she died, that she called his name Ben-Oni, and his father called him Benjamin. Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. This is the gist of the story, and this is why I really like substituting the church in for Rachel in this instance, is that we too feel a call like Rachel felt, that we were promised something more. We in 1830 started this church with the hopes of a few things: bringing the Book of Mormon, or bringing the fullness of the gospel to the Lamanites and the remnant of the house of Joseph, building up Zion, obviously a big one. And those two I'll talk about, really just those two. And yet, has that come to fruition yet? No, I would say not, unfortunately. And even though there was this big restoration through Joseph Smith and the reorganization through Joseph III, but really the reorganization through Joseph Smith Jr., our calling didn't satisfy the promise we felt like we were being made. We still felt this call to have another son, this son of promise, just like Rachel did. And then I think the question for each of us is where do we go to have that son? Where do we go to build Zion? Where do we go to bring the Book of Mormon to the people that need it? Well, I think it's important that we look at where Rachel was going. It says Rachel was died and buried in the way to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. And if you know your New Testament at all, Bethlehem is kind of an important place where someone kind of important was born. And this is the ultimate point of the talk, is that the Son of Promise had to be born at the same point that Jesus was born. And I'll say it in a different way, because something else had to happen for that boy to be born. Rachel had to die. And again, Rachel had to die for that son to be born. The church, in the same way, I think, has to die to themselves, to the world, whatever it may be, for our purpose to come into fruition. And I think there's a really deep lesson in there for us, because in Helaman 2:31, if you want to write that down, you don't have to, but it talks about a people that grew stronger and stronger in their humility and firmer in the faith of Christ. It says they were sanctified because they yielded their hearts to God. I think this is what that relationship is really talking about. That verse in Helaman is the spiritual side of things, but this is the physical side, where we have a throne in our heart And God can only sit on that throne as long as we are off of it ourselves. And the percentage of that seat that God can sit on is the same percentage that we leave open for him to sit on. And so as far as we yield ourselves to God, he can take control of our lives. As far as we yield the church to God, he can take control of the church. As far as we sacrifice our life, the church's life, to God, he can come and bring that son into the world, that son that we feel like we are promised. One more verse, which is just the first one that I read, and I hope it sounds a little bit different now, but this is again from 140, verse 5, paragraph 5, C and D. The work of preparation and the perfection of my saints go forward slowly, and Zionic conditions are no further away nor any closer than the spiritual condition of my people justifies. But my word shall not fail, neither will my promises, for the foundation of the Lord standeth sure. I think sometimes we look at all the gifts God has given us, and we seem to undervalue the gift of agency. And we say, God gave me the gift of agency so that I can choose where I go to college, or what to eat for breakfast, or whatever. And I don't think that's necessarily why God gave us agency. I think he gave us agency so that we can choose the most important choice, which is to get out of his way, to let him on the throne in our hearts, that he can take control of the church, of me, of this group, whatever it may be. And so I would encourage you, I really like to do that practice where you just look at women in the Old Testament, New Testament, wherever, and see what the church could learn from that situation, because so often, as God is the perfect husband to the church, there are some really good stories about how the church should act, or what the church needs to do in relation to our goals of the future.